I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Put the hats on.
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
This way, this way. No, wait, this way. That way. Walk.
The Newsies were also the clever people who asked me, if you want us to say the Pledge of Allegiance, shouldn't you have a flag? Which we didn't have out here, which has happened before. My name is Joe McQuaid. I'm the president of the Nacky Loeb School, and we are delighted that you folks are here tonight to help us honor the First Amendment and people who step up to support the First Amendment. The order of lineup is I'm going to explain the program to you and welcome you on behalf of somebody who is usually here and who I am greatly disappointed isn't, because Diane Mercier, head of People's United Bank, if you've been to one of these things before, she's done better than most of our speakers at expressing how important the First Amendment is in this country. She unfortunately had to have hip surgery last week. I talked to her today. She's doing well. She's still not sure if the election results are true because she's in and out of the Percocet. But she asked me to thank her fellow employees of People for all they do for the community and for all they've done for our program here tonight. So it was Diane and my daughter Katie McQuaid Cody who came up with the idea of, instead of having a guest speaker, and we've had them for the last 13 years, to instead speak of and for and put a spotlight on the First Amendment and the freedoms that we have under the First Amendment. And I don't think there's any more timely a topic than in the aftermath of the recent political wars to speak, revere, and explain a bit the First Amendment. So if Michael McDonald from U.S. Trust would come forward. Michael? Hey, Mike. There's Mike. If you didn't like the election results this year, blame Michael. Michael drove the guest speaker here a couple of years ago, and is the president-elect called you to be a driver in Washington yet? U.S. Trust has been a big part of this program and has sponsored the speaker for us. And since we don't have a speaker this year, he's going to introduce a little about our school and a video after that. Mike, thanks very much.
Good evening. When the Nacky Loeb School of Communications opened in 2000, there were 3 teachers in 3 classes: news writing, photography, and the First Amendment. Our school combined the basics of communications, the written word and images, with the First Amendment, which grants Americans amazing freedom to share their beliefs. At first, our school offered each of those 6-week classes 3 times a year. Now there are 30 teachers, 18 classes, and 15 one-day workshops. They still are based on the written word, images, and the First Amendment, but they have expanded just as our tools and methods of communicating have expanded in the last 16 years. Since our school's doors opened, thousands of students of all ages have registered, many of them returning to take multiple classes and workshops. They learn hands-on skills that they can put to use immediately to help at work, at school, and in everyday lives. No matter what method they use to communicate, students leave our school knowing they have the right to share their thoughts, words, and images because of the First Amendment, the envy of people around the world. The video, I believe, Joe?
Thank you.
Thank you.
U.S. Attorney Gregory Sullivan has begun his First Amendment classes at the Nacky Loeb School by displaying the Constitution. Here it is. Can everyone read it? That's okay, because as Greg points out, the most important 4 words are the largest. We the people at the beginning and done at the end. But our founders weren't really done. They needed to add some other ideas and rights. We're here to honor the first rights they added, the First Amendment. The rights guaranteed in the First Amendment are the underpinning of Greg's classes here, and also of everything else we do at our school, the Loeb School. We can teach people how to write blogs and editorials and news stories and how to take pictures, but without the rights guaranteed in the First Amendment, none of it would be worth much. Our students take classes in everything from writing news and blogging to social media and photography. They learn public speaking and public relations. Some classes have included 10-year-olds and retirees sitting side by side. Students have included homeschoolers and their parents, representatives of businesses and nonprofits, all here to learn hands-on skills to become better communicators. Our instructors come from media organizations and businesses from all over the state. They compete during the day and they cooperate here to share their skills with our students. I think Mrs. Loeb would be proud that her idea has turned into such a wonderful resource and a great legacy, and a great example of the benefits of the First Amendment. She also would be very grateful, as am I. Thanks to our students who come early and stay late. Just last month, our food writing class with Carol Choate not only stayed late, they came an extra week, and they brought food and had their own potluck dinner. Thanks to our sponsors, many of whom have been here with us since the beginning. And thanks to our instructors, who translate what they do for a living into lessons for all of us. And thanks to the First Amendment, the First Amendment.
Ladies and gentlemen, come close. I have something to say. The First Amendment, the 5 freedoms. Has there ever been a time, can you remember a time where it's been on such display all day, all night, for months on a national stage? It's been praised, it's been denounced, it's been ignored. You, sir, do you remember the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment? You, ma'am, do you know what the 5 freedoms mean to us as individuals and to us as a country? Let's find out.
Please take your green hymnals, turn to number 315, and the guys with the baskets, get ready. They're not like us. They don't speak like us. They don't look like us. They're taking our jobs, and there is no end to them. They just keep coming over and over like a swarm of locusts. And they're always getting in trouble. They don't believe in God the way we do, the way we always have in this country. They are the Irish. And later the French Canadians, the Germans, the Poles, and the Italians, now the Hispanics and some of the Africans, Catholics, fish eaters, petties, papists, slaves to Rome. They can't be trusted as Americans. The year is 1854, and we're outside St. Anne's Church, Manchester. An angry mob of some 500 stands ready to burn the church down and beat up any Catholic who stands in their way. There had been a fight between an immigrant and a native a few days earlier. The immigrant was killed. Then the Irish broke some windows. And now this crowd, who in other circumstances might be decent folks and helpful neighbors, has been whipped up by bigoted, violent nativist sentiment. Standard fare for the Know Nothing Party, a movement that was, at its core, deeply un-American. Then a group of other Protestant men, led by local contractor John Maynard, come and interpose themselves between the mob and some young Irish lads ready to defend their church. Happily, Maynard manages to break the tension. I suppose it helps that he might have had a gun in one hand. In the end, Manchester was spared some of the bloodshed and destruction that had hit other communities in New England at this time. Somehow, at some level, Maynard and those men who stood between the newcomers and the nativists understood that the First Amendment guarantees each one of us, you and you and you and me and all of us, freedom of religion, the ability to practice and celebrate our faith in God according to the dictates of our conscience. It even guarantees the freedom to dispense with religious practice altogether if we so choose. The First Amendment, ratified in 1791, declares Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Nothing quite like it had ever been seen in the world. This was a world where the religion of the prince was the religion of the people. And when people disagreed, they were often hounded and hunted. They could lose their property, their rights, even their lives, and millions did. Over the centuries elsewhere, Catholics oppressed Protestants, Protestants oppressed Catholics, Christians oppressed Muslims, Muslims oppressed Christians, and everybody oppressed the Jews. But it's not supposed to be that way here. Look at me. Fashionable, hey? You don't always see a lot of guys wandering around downtown Manchester in the habit of a Benedictine monk and priest. But I'm free to wear the traditional garb of my order in the Catholic Church, even if it does look a little bit like a cross between Monty Python and Dark Shadows. The First Amendment is not just about freedom to believe what we like, but to live it, to celebrate it, and to share it. Faith is meant to shape who we are, what we do, and how we do it. You know, I'm privileged to serve as pastor at St. Raphael Parish on the west side, where we have St. Benedict's Academy to educate youngsters from pre-K to grade 6 in our Catholic tradition. I'm free to teach and help govern St. Anselm College, where my English and communication classes keep me pretty busy. I might tell you, especially this past semester. I have published in Catholic magazines and newspapers. I've spoken at Jewish synagogues and at Protestant churches, as well as at civic organizations and clubs. I've chatted, agreed, and argued with some major political figures at our New Hampshire Institute of Politics at the college. I can join my brother monks in our community to sing the divine office in the Abbey Church, and I can celebrate Mass for our people at St. Raphael every day. I can give a kid a Bible or a rosary or the works of John Paul II, Mother Teresa, or Dorothy Day, or just about anybody. And I can visit homes and hospitals to bring the love and hope of Jesus Christ in and through the Word of God and the sacraments of the Church. Yes, we Catholics, just like other Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and nearly everybody else in the United States, have had some beefs with each administration. Can you say, little sisters of the poor? And we've had some bumps along the historical highway. Like every other freedom enshrined in the First Amendment, religious liberty has to be defended and at the proper time determine the proper separation of church, synagogue, mosque, and temple from the state. That has to be articulated and negotiated. If the First Amendment recognizes rights, it also summons all of us as citizens to responsibility and respect for those who may differ from us. You know, those guys on the lawn at St. Anne's weren't standing there just for Irish Catholics. They were standing there for you and me. They may not have known it or been able to give it voice, but with John Maynard, God bless him, they were asserting and defending the First Amendment and its religious liberty clause. And to that I can only say, Deo gratias. Thanks be to God. Alleluia.
freedom of speech, when I was asked to say a few words about that category, it made me think a lot about the last 2 or 3 decades of my life. I've been able to have a career starting off as a sports reporter north of Boston, writing free speech, television career, and now a radio host of my show, New Hampshire Today. During the TV years, mostly at WMUR-TV as a news director, I don't think I appreciated then the same way I do tonight at this great event, freedom of speech. As a young news director, I'd often be called by a lawyer, a judge, asked to reveal a source of a story. I'd have to stand by that story because sometimes the truth is a tough thing to get out. But the dots didn't really connect for me until David Terowasaki from the Naki Loeb School asked me to say a few words tonight. And it connected with me a few years ago and now tonight and this week for freedom of speech. And I want to ask tonight before I go on, how many veterans in the audience? I know there's a Marine in the front audience, Andy Cruz from Auto Fair, who served this country. Thank you, Andy. How many veterans tonight in the audience? Thank you. You see, I asked that because the years at WMUR-TV, through free speech, we had things like telethons for diabetes, Jerry Lewis, muscular dystrophy, and all that. But it wasn't until a few years ago when I had my own radio show, when a panel of veterans came in, they asked to be on. This was before the Phoenix VA backups with care. And it happened live on my show. And they explained to me, to our listeners, how they were waiting for weeks or months to get a knee fixed, a hip fixed, a neck fixed from the VA in Manchester or the system that they relied on for care. And I thought I knew a little bit about the state. I had no idea what they were going through quietly. See, a veteran who serves is not good at asking for help because they're the one who serve. So a little bell went off in my head, and I didn't know then, and I'm glad I'm here tonight to talk about this. Through free speech and my radio show and the power of the microphone, the power of listenership, the power of public advocacy, in a few short years, because I got so incensed, and I didn't know that veterans, just a few years ago, before the presidential election, before the primary and all that, before the Phoenix VA mess, had to get on a van in Manchester and go down to Jamaica Plain or West Roxbury, Massachusetts, or Connecticut, or White River Junction to get something fixed. And it made me upset. So I used the power of free speech to criticize the VA, not the men and women who work there. There's many good veterans that work at the VA. It's a system. But I criticized it. It probably would have got me locked up in some countries because it's part of the federal government. It goes back to post-Civil War. And I criticized why were our true heroes waiting so long for care. And I didn't do it one show, 1 week. I did it on. Until the governor of the state called, Governor Hassan, and Senator Shaheen, Senator Ayotte, what can we do to help? That's New Hampshire. That's free speech. Live free or die. Death is not the worst of all evils. John Stark. So through my show on the power of free speech, we had 2 Senate hearings, U.S. Senate hearings, Shaheen and Ayotte in Manchester at St. Anselm College, with the VA sitting there scratching their heads when these veterans would stand up and say, I waited weeks, months, and then I went, my appointment was changed, and I'm just trying to get my knee fixed. And they didn't have an answer. So through my show, and this is just one radio show through the power of the microphone and free speech, this choice program was enacted in Congress. Veterans who want care through the choice program, not at a VA facility, can now get it. So I started this thing live in the show, and I think Alex Walker's here tonight from Catholic Medical Center. I saw him. I don't know if he's still here. He was on my show, and he said, Jack, I've been listening. We want to be a hospital that will care for veterans under the choice program so they don't have to go to Massachusetts for a heart stent or a bypass. I said, Alex, you're a hospital for hero. And that name stuck. So through this microphone, through the media, through my show, we started this effort, Hospitals for Heroes. And last July 4th, right around Independence Day, ironically, all 26 hospitals in the state of New Hampshire signed up to be part of my show's Hospitals for Heroes. I say this not about me and my ego in the show. It's not about that. It's about fighting for something through free speech, affecting the lives of those who served us. So my calling in life till the day I pass is to help veterans. My dad was a Marine. He died when I was young. And I'm just proud that through that amendment, through free speech, we've been able in the state of New Hampshire to sign up every hospital, all 26. So any veteran who wants to use the choice program can go 2 minutes or 3 minutes from their home in Coos County, Cheshire County, Rockingham, Hillsborough, you name it. and get care and not have to go out of state. That's pretty cool. No state in the country has this. Number two, we found out through my show that the VA was not providing dental care. So just through the power of advocacy, the power of free speech, the power of listenership, the power of sponsorship, we were able to get dentists in New Hampshire, veteran-owned dentists, to provide surgery for free for our veterans. I found out the other day on the show, this past year, 545 veterans have gone to CMC, one hospital, for care they would not have gotten if it were not for free speech, if it were not for this amendment. They would have gone out of state. The year before, just over 100. We're not done. It's through the power of communication, through the power of speech, that I've been able to do this. And I'll continue doing it. And we had 2 radiothons, 12 hours commercial free, again, through the microphone, and we raised almost $300,000 for Veterans Count. It's a coveted amendment. I didn't realize how damn important it was until my 56th year on this earth. Thank you all. It's very important. Let's protect it.
My name is Joe McQuaid, and I'm a newspaper publisher. And if you think you've wandered into an AA meeting, I'm sorry, but people in my business are in a spot of bother these days. It's not just here in Manchester. I have a friend who's a newspaper publisher, and he has a sideline as a ventriloquist. And in the act, his dummy sits on his knee, and the dummy says to my friend, "You're a lousy ventriloquist. You better not quit your day job." And then the dummy looks at him and says, "What is your day job?" And the guy says, "I'm a newspaper publisher." And the dummy says, "Quit your day job." My father and grandfather were in the newspaper business. My father started a paper on this street after World War II. His dad worked at the Manchester Union before the palace was built, and then went to work for William Randolph Hearst in Boston. And legend has it, family lore, that when Calvin Coolidge announced that he would not seek a second full term as president, Elias A. McQuaid wrote the headline, "This spring, the sap from Vermont will not run." I wonder what he would do were there not a First Amendment. Were there not a First Amendment, none of us would be here tonight, for which I thank you. You're helping honor and support a school that honors and supports the First Amendment. But these are really trying times, and who knows what may happen to the First Amendment. I understand that certain people may want to, like Obamacare, replace and repeal the First Amendment, but you still get to use your own lawyer. So we need to protect the First Amendment. But even if there is a First Amendment, it can't protect that which is no longer there. I want to read a few things from the newspaper. A recent New York Times piece quoted U.S. Senator Claire McCaskill as calling the failing business model of real journalism the biggest crisis facing our democracy. Now, politicians are known to be hyperbolic on occasion, but I think there's more than a grain of truth in what she says. Since the year 2000, the population of professional journalists in this country has been cut in half. And if there are no more professional reporters and editors, where the heck are Americans going to get their information? Who are they going to rely on? There's something out there these days called fake news, in which anybody with the internet can gin up anything they want. There's no checks or balances. They just put it out there. That, I think, is dangerous. If Washington Post editor Marty Barron, he was at the Boston Globe when they won the spotlight for the Catholic Church series. He asked, if you have a society where people can't agree on basic facts, how do you have a functioning democracy? Now, that's not to say that it's all doom and gloom. Newspaper companies are upscaling their websites. We have more readers on there than ever before. But digital dimes do not replace print dollars, so there has to be a new formula. Some newspapers, like the one I work for, thanks to William and Naki Loeb, are owned by nonprofits, like the Naki Loeb School. And those nonprofits understand that a newspaper should be about more than simply making money. And thanks to my bright young editor, Trent Spinner, we have a year-long reporter from a New Hampshire Endowment for Health focusing in on issues of age and health in the Granite State. They're not as funny as funny cat videos, but they've been enlightening, and they put a spotlight on a real coming tsunami. They call it the silver tsunami. Also important is the nuts and bolts coverage of state and local government. If you went to the State House in Concord now and visited the Don Tibbetts press room, you'd be able to pull up a chair, because there aren't many reporters there any longer. It's us, the Concord Monitor, sometimes the Associated Press. Right here in Manchester, there used to be 3 commercial radio stations competing with the union leader to cover City Hall. Not anymore. And no offense to cable and television news, but they do not go nearly as in-depth as newspapers can and do, and on which cable and TV often rely for their news. The First Amendment allows us to do this, to have reporters and editors and printers, to pay them to dig up facts and print them. But sometimes we have to do more than that. We have, and his name was on the screen here, Attorney Greg Sullivan. He teaches classes at the school. He's also our lawyer at the union leader. And he has done a great deal because of his skill and knowledge of the First Amendment and right to know issues to help and open up government in New Hampshire. With the elections behind us, the business of governing remains, as does the business of reporting on that government. In a New York Times piece, my friend Jonathan Martin recently tweeted to his followers the following: "Folks, subscribe to a paper. Democracy demands it." And the columnist added, "Or don't. You'll get what you pay for." I will leave you with something that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a friend who was representing Virginia in the Constitutional Convention in 1787, mind you, several years before Father Day and the original founding fathers put in the Bill of Rights. "I am persuaded," Jefferson said. Did you know him well, Father?
It was a little bit cheeky, though.
"I am persuaded," Jefferson said, "that the good sense of the people will always be found to be the best army. They may be led astray for a moment, but will soon correct themselves." He went on to say that the way to prevent people from getting it wrong is to give them full information of their affairs through the channel of the public papers, and he meant newspapers, and to contrive that those papers should penetrate the whole mass of the people. The basis of our governments being the opinion of the people, the very first object should be to keep that right, and were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter.
So the American Friends Service Committee is an organization connected to the Quakers. It's been around for 99 years. And a little over 35 years ago, the New Hampshire office of the American Friends Service Committee decided to hire me to direct their program here. And I'm pretty sure it was largely because of my experience in training people to organize peaceful protests, including the use of civil disobedience. Now, when I think about what I do now, it includes, I put out a newsletter, I have a radio show, I was out in the streets with people a couple days ago protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline. And in fact, the meeting I was at right before I came down to the palace today, I was working with a group of church people to help them organize a day of advocacy at the State House. So in a sense, Joe, you could say that the First Amendment is my job description, right? So that's kind of what I do. Now, we put all this experience to work during, remember the New Hampshire primary? Anyway, there was a campaign recently, it went on for a long time, and we put this to use in a project we called Governing Under the Influence, which had to do with the excessive influence of large corporations over our political process, in addition to training more than 900 people with skills to go out and engage with the presidential candidates and train and ask effective questions. We also went out in the streets with these big banners more than 166 times. We brought these banners out into public places as part of our expression of the need for change. And if we were out at more Republican events than Democratic events, that's because there were 3 or 4 times as many Republican candidates as Democratic candidates during this recent period of time. Now, sometimes we had to argue a little bit with the police about where we could be. So I remember, for example, a day in which St. Anselm College was hosting a presidential debate that was sponsored by the union leader and emceed by Jack Heath. And we were told by the local police that the sidewalk on St. Anselm Drive was the property of the college, and that therefore we could not be there. So we knew that was not the case, and but you have to, if you get into this work, you have to understand what your rights actually are, and you have to be prepared to assert them in order for them to stay alive. Now, last December, when candidate Donald Trump first made his statement about enacting a ban on all Muslims coming to the United States, the very next event, or actually you could say the first event that he did in public after that, was at the Sheraton in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So with about 24 hours notice, we organized, you could call it a demonstration, you could call it a protest. It was not a protest against Mr. Trump, but it was a statement saying the theme was no hate, no fear, no war, and we stood outside the Sheraton with signs with messages such as love your neighbor, and we welcome refugees. And within less than 24 hours, we assembled more than 200 people there to have a peaceful assembly. And this is part of what we're able to do due to the First Amendment. We showed the power that peaceable assembly can have. What I want to say this evening is we really don't know what to expect in the next couple years. We know that the president-elect has expressed hostility to the free press. We know that the president-elect has said he wants to arrest and deport 3 million people. Yesterday, one of his advisors said that they are likely to try to establish a registry of Muslims in the country. And today, someone very close to the president-elect said that he believes that the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II presents a model for what the new administration might do. So with this ahead of us, possibly, we remember the words of Martin Niemöller, a German pastor during the time of the rise of the Nazis, who said, first they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. When they finally came for me, there was no one left. And in fact, Pastor Niemöller did spend time in a Nazi prison. So we have to learn lessons like that. We are determined to speak out and to speak up. It will be based on the religious values that undergird our work, so it has to do with freedom of religion, but we will be looking for all peaceable methods of expressing ourselves in order to stand up and uphold the values that we believe in. And I guess the last thing I'd like to say this evening is that The power of the First Amendment is not as much in the words that are printed on an ancient parchment as they are in our willingness to use it, including in times when its use is challenged. So I guess I hope to see some of you in the streets. Thank you.
Good evening. How many of you, through your applause, have a dependent between the ages of 19 and 26, or have had a dependent between those ages? Please applause. My name is Anne Marie Morse, and I'd like to tell you a story. On December 12, 2003, my day began like any other day. I went to school, and at approximately 10 o'clock, my daughter called me and told me that she was having horrific abdominal pain and that she needed to see a doctor. She went to see the doctor at 4 o'clock, and she called me and told me that she needed emergency surgery for a twisted ovary. What was supposed to be an hour-and-a-half surgery turned into 3. And when the doctor came out of the operating room and sat us down and told us that our daughter had advanced colon cancer, my body went into shock. At the time of her surgery, my daughter Michelle was a full-time student at Plymouth State University. Her doctors advised her to take a leave of absence, or at the very least cut her course load into part-time, because her chemotherapy regimen was going to be very aggressive. I contacted the insurance carrier in the New Hampshire Insurance Department and was told it didn't matter that that's what the doctors had recommended. If she didn't stay in school full-time, she could not remain on my insurance. End of discussion. In fact, an employee at the New Hampshire Insurance Department said to me, "If you don't like it, you can change the law, and that'll take a long time." And my response to her was, "I have the time." I took to heart what the New Hampshire insurance employee told me, and I knew I had to change a law. And my motto is, never mess with a mom who's passionate about a cause. Therefore, we decided we were going to change a law. It was not going to help Michelle, and she decided that she was going to stay in school full-time in order to stay on her insurance. Michelle began an aggressive regimen of chemotherapy from January of 2004 and through November of 2004. 3 short weeks after she completed her chemotherapy treatment, we sadly learned that the cancer had spread to both lungs. We were living every parent's worst nightmare. Here's where the First Amendment right to petition the government began to affect my family and yours. While Michelle was a full-time student and a full-time patient, our family, together with the New Hampshire legislature, the American Cancer Society, the media, and the staff and students from Plymouth State University took the position of why not and began to change the law. It wasn't an easy task. We had to convince many lawmakers that this was not a handout, that the cost of insurance would not go up, and this wasn't a mandate. These kids were already on the family plan. With the assistance of many, many people, we planned our strategy. However, we had to wait 13 months after Michelle's diagnosis to have our first hearing. An employee at the American Cancer Society helped set up meetings for me. I got to learn the ins and outs, who was who in the legislature, how it worked, the whole process. Numerous phone calls and emails were made from my friends, family, and colleagues. One legislator had told me he had never received as many phone calls and emails on any one bill as he did with Michelle's Law. After an 18-month journey, Michelle's Law was signed by New Hampshire Governor John Lynch on June 22, 2006. Sadly, Michelle never got to witness that event. She passed away 6 months after she graduated from Plymouth State on November 10, 2005, at 7:20 a.m. with her dad and I by her side, the same way she came into this world. She was just shy of her 23rd birthday. However, our work wasn't done. I kept hearing that this law was not going to help the Morses because, see, I fell under federal law. So my thought was, I'll change a federal law. What did I know? So in September 2006, I met with our Washington delegation in face-to-face meetings, and I asked for support for a federal version of the law. I promised them I would do anything that I could. By the time I left, I knew I had the needed support from our elected officials. In January of 2007, Michelle's Law was born, and my thought was, now what do I do? I could either sit back and let everybody else do the work, or I could get involved in myself. I chose the latter. I was a teacher by day and Michelle's Law advocate by afternoon and night. I called anybody and everybody who would listen. And over the course of time, in the United States federal government, we were able to get our co-sponsors to 35% in both the House and the Senate. On July 30th, 2008, my son Michael and I witnessed the U.S. House of Representatives pass its version of Michelle's Law by a voice vote, which was thrilling. And I just kept saying to myself, wow, wow, we did it. Things were moving along, we had momentum, but time wasn't on our side. We had to get the law passed within the current session of Congress, which was ending in 6 months. What I ended up doing then was starting to call all kinds of senators, asking for support, and we were very fortunate, and on September 25th of the same year, with the help of many senators, we got word that Michelle's Law passed through the Senate unanimously. Nearly 2 years to the day that I spoke with our New Hampshire delegation in D.C. The final stop was the President. On October 9, 2008, we completed our journey with President Bush's signature. Michelle's Law is now the law of the land. Because my motto is never mess with the mom who's passionate about a cause, Michelle's Law was the kickoff for all dependents to stay on their parents' plan up to the age of 26 under the Affordable Care Act. How many of your children between the ages of 19 and 26 would be insured without the First Amendment right to petition the government? Thank you.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the First Amendment, the 5 freedoms, in words and deeds. It's our right to support them, to ignore them, to denounce them. It's our duty to keep them strong. Thank you.